A very good evening to my dear delegates. Are you dreaming to become a successful back-end developer? Need a spark of encouragement? Are you hustling to clear all of your doubts on back-end development? If you are, warmly welcome to Back-to-Back Web Series, which is organized by Free and Open Source Software Community in University of Balendrakumar. You have found the best place to learn everything about what you have been seeking for. With immense pleasure, first of all, I would like to welcome our honorable guest speaker of the session, Mr. Banujan Balendrakumar, a senior software engineer and experienced developer. And next, our beloved delegates, the keen future developers who are willing to be responsible for server-side application and also passionate front-end developers for very initial web session, getting started with Node.js of back-to-back web series. In today's session, we will be discussing about Node.js, which is very famous in the industry based on JavaScript. Before getting into the session, I would like to remind you a few things. During the session, if you had any doubts, please don't hesitate to post your doubts in the chat box. There will be a Q&A session at the end of the program. During that session, our speaker will be answering all of the problems. So please be very kind enough to keep your mic muted. I know you people are very much excited to get into the event. So without wasting your time, let's start with today's session. I hope Mr. Banujan Balendrakumar is now ready to take over the event.
Right. So good evening, guys. So thank you for the warm introduction and welcome. So unfortunately, I can't share my camera. Instead of that, I share my screen. Okay. So can you guys see my screen?
Yeah, we can hear you. Sorry.
Can you see my screen?
Yeah, it's visible. It's visible.
All right, fine. So let's get started. So I will take your next 1 hour. So this is very introduction session. So I will give an introduction about myself at the end of the session. So without further ado, let's get started. All right. So JavaScript. So JavaScript is one of the most popular programming language today. In backend development, Node.js is rocking the world nowadays. Okay. In this session, I will give you a very basic introduction about Node.js and how it works. Then we can write a simple Node.js REST API. And this session is for most of absolute Node.js or backend beginners actually. So we will not discuss any intermediate or advanced topic here. Okay. So before talk about Node.js, let me talk about some facts about JavaScript. I assume that most of you know at least the basics of JavaScript because we are not going to learn JavaScript in this session. Okay. So let's see how JavaScript works. What's the JavaScript engine, and then we'll move to Node.js. All right. So JavaScript is a general purpose programming language, but JavaScript was initially released as a scripting language for websites, which is running in web browsers. But nowadays we can create web, mobile, and desktop applications using JavaScript. So the most modern JavaScript is becoming a general purpose programming language. It's dynamically typed, so which means there's no type definition in JavaScript. Which means JavaScript is a dynamically typed language. It just types in runtime. So you can see the example in right side. So the difference between C++ and JavaScript. So C++ is a statically typed language and JavaScript is dynamically typed. So here the difference is in C++, you need to define the data type like int, float, string. Okay, but JavaScript, you just assign it like a var or cons or let keywords. Okay, so we don't need to define a type. It's interpreter based. Okay, so dynamically typed languages cannot be compiled. So because we don't know the types in compile time. Okay, as I said before, JavaScript, we don't need to define the type in when you code. It's happened in the runtime. So it's interpreter based. It supports object-oriented programming, but the issue is JavaScript is not a class-based object-oriented language, but it supports. It's a prototype-based language, but it supports WP through prototyping. In 2015, a class keyword was introduced, it makes JavaScript seems like a more developer-oriented language, but still it's using existing prototyping method behind the scenes. Okay, but it doesn't mean you can't do WP programming. You can, but it's a prototype-based language, not WP, class-based WP. Alright, so it has huge community support and many many libraries and frameworks out there. That stuff. Alright. So nowadays, the abilities of JavaScript is you can develop both front-end and back-end applications using libraries and frameworks like React, Angular, Vue, and Node.js. And for mobile, you have React Native and Ionic. For desktop, there's an Electron.js. The most famous code editor, Visual Studio, built on Electron.js. Right. So V8 engine. This is a very hot topic today because before you getting started with Node.js, you really need to know about V8 engine. So the V8 engine, powerful JavaScript engine by Google. To execute some high-level programming language, you need a runtime. Okay, so V8 engine is a high-performance JavaScript engine which provides environment to execute JavaScript. V8 was developed by Google using C++ to power Google Chrome initially and licensed under open source. So, which means it's open source. You can clone the source code and develop your own engine or own process on top of it. Okay. But not only V8 engines, so other browsers have their own JavaScript engines. Okay. The Google Chrome has a V8 engine, and the Mozilla uses SpiderMonkey. Safari uses Nitro, and IE uses Chakra. But the latest version of Edge browsers uses V8 engine. Okay. Right. So the V8 is independent, which can be integrated into other projects outside the browser. And this is the key feature enable the rise of Node.js. So this means not only inside the browser using V8 engine, you can execute the JavaScript outside the browser. Okay. So after seeing these features, developers thought, okay, what if we can run JavaScript outside the browser, just like another programming language like Java or PHP? Okay. So they created the Node.js to give an environment to execute JavaScript standalone in your computer without browser support. All right. So V8 engine actually compiles JavaScript. Wait, but we earlier discussed like JavaScript is not using compiler. It's interpreted based language. It's pretty confusing, right? But here, a technique called JIT compiling, or Jit compiling, just-in-time compiling. So this is why V8 engine is executes JavaScript in peak performance. Okay. So what happens is when you execute JavaScript code in V8 engine, it's first interpreting the code using a tool called Ignition. Okay, so it's built-in component inside V8 engine. So after that, it gets an unoptimized machine code. So after that, it scanning the machine code and utilizing it using a turbofan and crankshaft. Those are internal components of V8 engines. And finally gets optimized machine code. But not only V8 engine, the SpiderMonkey also doing the same process. But the actual difference is V8 engine doesn't produce any intermediate code like bytecode or something else. So that's why V8 engine is much faster and used in Node.js. Okay. Right. So the hottest topic today, Node.js. When I ask someone about Node, or when I talking to someone about Node.js, so most of guys saying it's like a framework or language. It's not a framework or language. It's just a runtime, which means it's giving you an environment. For example, imagine we live on Earth because Earth has friendly environment for living things like us. But we can't live on Mars, okay? Because Mars doesn't have such an environment to live. So if we want, we have to create environment ourselves, like artificially. Okay. So like that, Node.js is a runtime environment for run Node.js on top of V8 engine. because JavaScript is initially designed to run inside the browser. So if we want to take the JavaScript outside the browser, we need to develop our own custom environment to provide I/O operations, storage mechanism, and network threads, something like that. So OS-based process. Okay. So Node.js is such a JavaScript runtime built on Chrome's V8 engine to execute JavaScript outside the browser. So this is the environment architecture of Node.js actually. So when you compare to Java, so there's a Java runtime. On top of that, we have Java library classes. So on top of that, we have Java virtual machine called JVM. So on top of that, your code will be running. So like this, the Node.js. So on top of that, Node.js have some APIs and modules. So when I say APIs, it doesn't mean it's a REST API. It's OS level APIs like storage management, I/O operations, something like that. CPU intensive, something like that. So on top of that, we have V8 engine, and on top of that, your Node app, just like JavaScript code executes. All right. The Node.js pros and cons. So the Node.js has some bottlenecks too. So it's asynchronous and event-driven. It's a pros, and then we will discuss about the cons. The asynchronous and event-driven. So Node.js will process each request asynchronously without any delay, which asynchronously means parallelly. Okay, so request will not wait another request to end. After processing the request, it will push out a callback to serve the response. Okay, so Node.js uses event loops to handle the event-based execution. It's pretty advanced stuff, so we don't need to dig further. Just look at the image right side. This is how the event loops actually works. Okay, so it triggers an event, initialize callback. Once the request is done, it again executes the callback and serve the response. This is how it works. And single-threaded but highly scalable. JavaScript is single-threaded language, so Node.js is also single-threaded. But this is a very debatable topic actually, because they mentioned that Node.js is single-threaded, but it's using multi-threads in background. It's pretty tricky topic actually. This might be confusing, but the truth is, Node.js is single-threaded, but its background it uses multiple threads to execute asynchronous code with the help of libuv library or libuv library. Okay, so we don't need to talk about further because it's a highly advanced topic like a single-threaded, multi-threaded thread pools. So once you get familiar with Node.js, in upcoming sessions, we will discuss about it. Fast execution with Jit compilation. So as we discussed before, it uses V8 engine. So V8 engine uses Jit compilation. So the code executes much faster than other engines. But there are some disadvantages. Performance bottleneck with heavy computation, which means Node.js is not recommended for CPU intensive tasks. Okay, so it will not handle highly CPU intensive tasks like graphic related stuff or high numeric computations or machine learning related stuff, something like that. But in 2018, they introduced a feature called worker threads to manage CPU bound tasks. But still, it's an experimental mode. So far, it's not recommended to write your CPU intensive tasks. If you want to run CPU intensive tasks, then you need to run services on top of Go language or Rust and call from Node.js. So there is another fancy topics called WebAssembly. Okay, so it's the callback hell issue. So it's not a really issue of JavaScript. Okay, so this is how a callback hell looks like. So when we say callbacks are just functions. Okay, that runs after each task in the queue finished. So as you can see, we are calling a function A. Okay, so inside we are passing another function, then executes B, passing another function, C, passing another function. So actually, this issue comes from asynchronous execution. So when we call callbacks, You can learn it in JavaScript asynchronous part. Okay, so the issue is let's imagine you are working on a highly big projects, so the code will be messy. So when you look into the code, it's hard to read. So that's what we call callback help. Okay, so here is the part we can start some code works. Okay, so okay, fine. So now I'm going to write a small API REST API using Node.js, using core Node.js and using Express.js. Okay, so let me create a new directory. Okay. Okay, so let me create a new sample JavaScript here. So let me name it as index.js. Let's check everything works fine or not. So let me log some random stuff in console. So console.log. As usual, hello. Okay, I'm saving it. I'm open terminal here. Let me know if you can't see the text clearly, so I can make the font size pretty bigger. Okay. So to execute, before you need to install Node.js, obviously. So you can simply install Node.js like let me show you from the official website. So Node.js, if you're a Mac user, you can install through Homebrew. Okay, so you can download the latest stable version here. So I'm using the 15.14. Okay, let's check everything's fine. So Node -- version. Okay, I'm using 15.13 and npm version 7.76. So npm basically is a package manager to install some libraries for JavaScript. You don't need to install additionally. It comes with Node. Okay, so when you install Node, npm is also there. So jump to the project. So I want to execute this index.js file. Okay, so I'm just run like node index.js. Okay, so you can see hello world. So it works fine. Let's write a simple sample API. So please keep it in mind. See here we are writing a sample APIs. So which means we are not following any best practices or security patches or security best practices and architectural concept design patterns. Okay, so simply we don't care about that. So we are writing a simple JavaScript code like a noob. Okay. So in upcoming sessions, we can discuss some advanced topics. Right. So yeah, let's start with importing to package is really important. So const HTTP. Where Oh, so this HTTP package help us to create a HTTP server actually, because if you are writing the server-side language or server-side scripting, so you probably need a server software. Okay? So you have to listen a port and get the request and then send back the response. So the HTTP module help us to build a HTTP server internally. Okay, so you don't need to install this package using npm. So because this is a Node.js built-in package, so when you install Node.js, it comes out there. Okay, so const HTTP. And one more package we need called URL. So require. So this package is important to pass the URL actually. So when you pass the string URL, it will split it like a protocols, subdomains, domains, and parameters like that. So this is really helpful to define routes. So let's data. So here we will have data. So let me tell you that we are going to write some APIs like localhost/users, which will list all the users from this array. Okay, so here we are not going to use any databases. Okay, because of lack of time. And so another API called localhost user/ID. So this will return the correct user of that ID, which means in the list of the users, it will search for the ID and return the exact user detail. And another API will be localhost user post. Okay, so using this API, we can create new users. We can simply append data to this data. Okay. And we have one more API, localhost user, which is a delete method. We just delete a particular user. Okay. So let's define a host name. Const host is equal to localhost 127.0.0.1. So since we are using a local machine to test, we are running this service in localhost. Okay, so this is pretty tricky actually. So when you host your application to production servers, then you might need to do some additional configuration. For now, we are running on local machines, so we define the host name as localhost, or maybe 127.0.0.1, both are identical. Okay, so the port number, let's say 880 or 3000. Okay, so always remember the port number you define should be free. Okay, because otherwise it will throw error. On server, so we are defining a server parameter which consumes create server method from HTTP package. So we are defining HTTP package above. So we are calling http.create server. Okay, create server, which takes a callback function. Takes two arguments, and the first one is request. The second one is response. Okay. Here we need to pass the URL actually. So const URL.pass. Request.URL. The two it's for to specify the data construct. Okay. All right. So we got the URL, because the URL means when we pass here. So when we pass like a localhost/users, we need to get the user, or we need to get this parameter, right? So you're passing the URL blocks from the absolute URL. Okay, so let's write first API. Request dot URL, so path name. is equal to that, which means home URL. Okay, and request dot method is equal to get. Okay, so now we are saying if the path name is just absolute home path and the request method is get, let's return something like response. So we will respond like, hey, welcome. Okay, so we created a sample server here. So we need to call it here server dot listen. So we are going to listen to a specific port, which we already defined here. Port and the host name, which is localhost, and then say something like console.log. So this one. Okay, fine. So let's run this script. So node index.js. Okay, so you can see server is running, which means this block. Let's check it out. Localhost. We are running on 3000. Okay, welcome. Okay, so what really happens is it will take this URL and map with this path name. So path name means the block after this origin URL. So here we have nothing. So I define like empty. We have nothing. Okay. So let's say if you had another block like users, hey, welcome to users page. Okay. So I'm stopping this server, run it again to get the changes. Hey, welcome. And when you type user, wait, user or users? Users. Hey, welcome to users. Okay. Okay, so let's start the API implementation. All right, so in this, the first API, we are returning all the users, okay? Returns all users, which is here in data, okay? So return, respond, end, sorry, it should be here, users. It's still hello world. Okay, so return all users. Okay. So here we have array. Okay, so data is an array. We need to stringify it. We need to convert it to string because HTTP calls never support arrays natively. Okay, so JSON stringify this data. Okay, and always remember you need to set the header. So here we are sending a JSON data. Okay, so you have to set header called response dot set header content type, which is application. Okay, so if you are the absolute beginner for backend development, then you have to study some HTTP headers and status codes, something like that. Okay, so the content type means we are defining what type of data we are returning from the API. So here we are returning a JSON string. So we are saying the client we are sending content type is application JSON. Okay. Also the response status code. Okay. So status code is 200, which means success. The API executed successfully. All right. So there are a couple more status code like 404 or resource not found, 500 which means internet server error, something like that. Okay, I'm saving it. Stop server, start it again. Here, instead of browser, I'm using a Postman, which is a very famous tool to check APIs. So here I'm creating new request, localhost 3000 users. Okay, get method. Okay, here we are defining get method. So this request should be get sent. Okay, now you can see it's returned empty array, and in headers you can see content type is application JSON, and the status is 200. Okay, right. So since we have no data here, it's returning empty array. Okay, let's move. Fine. So let's copy this block. Paste it here. Here we're gonna create a new user. Okay, so we're gonna add new user. So the path name will be remain same users, and the method we should change host. Okay. So after that, we need to receive the data from client side. So we need to send the user details to append here. So let me define a empty variable called a body. Okay. So here, it's a post request. Okay. So here in body, we're gonna send a user detail. Okay, which is a JSON data. It looks something like user ID, or maybe 001, username, maybe okay, so it's enough. Okay, so we need to receive this data in server side. So I'm defining an empty variable called body. So there's a method called request.on. Chunk body append chunk to string. So what I'm doing is we are receiving data as a chunk. Chunk means a small piece of data. And when I receive the chunk, I need to add everything to this body. So then only I can get the complete data. So once I get the complete data, we need to do something like request.on, which means after I get all the data, so a callback. So after I get all the data, I need to change it to JSON format, JavaScript array format, because I'm here, we are getting a string. Okay, so we need to override with array, so we can easily to handle the data in JavaScript. So JSON dot pass the body. So we are getting the body and override with JSON form. Okay. So after I converted to JSON, we have data, and I need to push the data to body, push the body to data. Okay. So the body contains the user details, and the data contains the list of users. So we are pushing the new user detail to the list of users. Okay. So once I have done, I do the same thing. Okay. So response status code is 200, which is success already here. So we are return all the data. Okay. So instead of all the data, I'm returning current data. Okay. So set header content type application JSON, everything. Okay. Let's run this code and see it's working or not. Here we are getting empty data. Let's add this data. Okay, send it. Wait a minute. The issue is we need to add this code inside this callback function. Okay. Server write again. Okay, we have empty data, and okay, so I submitted this data and it's returned the current data. Let's see if we received the data correctly in list. So I'm sending this request. Now you can see 01 John. Let me add another user called user ID 002, maybe like Mary. Oh, and okay, I'm sending it. Done. Let's check here. So you can see there's a John. So there's another data called and so which is working perfectly fine. Right. Then move to another API. Okay. So these both APIs are done. Okay. So let's get let's do another API. Here we send URL like users/001. So when we trigger this URL, it should return the data of this 001 user. Okay, so which means I should get the result of this user only. Okay, this is very tricky part in Node.js actually, because let's make it. Okay, so the request path name is users absolutely fine, but the issue is we don't know the exact ID here. It's just dynamic. It can be 001, it can be 002, or it can be 003, whatever it is. So we can't define it here. Okay. So most of users, most of developers using regex to match the pattern, but I don't like regex actually. So I'm going with simple solution. Request path name, dot path name dot split at one index one users. Okay, which means let's say I'm passing this URL. Okay, 001. So in request URL, we will get this structure only. So I'm splitting this structure using this slash. So which means the 0 array will be empty. Okay, which means we have nothing in front of this slash. Okay, and one index should be users. Okay, which means the another set is users, and the next set is 001. Okay, so second index is the user ID 001. So here I'm checking the index 1 is equal to users. Okay, then what I'm doing is do the same thing. Actually, this is very bad practice. I'm just demonstrating you how to deal with these routes. Okay, so I'm getting to this is we know this is user ID. Okay, this is user ID. Okay. So now we need to filter the user, exact user. So const user, we have data. We need to filter. Okay. So filter each users where the user ID matches a requested user ID. Okay. So once I got the data, I'm passing the user here. I'm returning the exact user. Okay. So please start the server. I'm adding new user here, 001 and 002 John. Okay, so let's see, we have all the users. Okay, we have all the users here. Okay, so now I need the user information of 001. Okay, I'm sending it. Okay. Oh, what's the issue here? Okay, users. Okay. Okay, so the issue is here we are splitting. So the split function automatically remove this slash. So we need to remove slash here also. Okay. Let me add two users, 002 John and 001 Mary. See, we have all users. Okay, John and Mary. Let's get 001. Okay, so 001 is Mary. Let's check here. 001 is Mary. Okay. Let's try 002. 002 is John. That's fine. Let's try 003. Okay, 003 is empty because we don't have any users with the ID 003. Okay. All right. So we have one more API to delete a specific user. Okay. So I do the same thing because we need user detail here. So I'm copy and paste this code. Here, the only changes is get should be delete. Okay, so method should be delete. This is a standard REST API method. Okay, so here we are getting a user ID, and here we have a small change. In this code, we are filtering the user. Okay, in this code, we are filtering the user with the requested user ID. But now we need to remove the exact user from the list. So we are overwriting the list. Okay, so I filter every data which is not equal to the user ID. Okay, so the correct user will be ignored. So then reassign the data with the rest of the users. Okay, so then we need we return something like success. We don't need to return any object here. Deleted success. Okay, fine. Let's check. Restart server. Okay, and copy this URL. Create new request. Fine. Here the get should be delete. Okay, fine. So let's add some user. One is Mary. Who is John? So let's check. We have all the users. Right. So we have all the users. Then we are going to this delete request and asking our server to delete this 001 user. Okay. I'm sending the request. Here you can see deleted successfully. Okay. So let's check it's actually deleted or not. So I'm going back to the users API and send the request. Now you can see the 001 ID is removed. Okay. So now we have only one record. Right? So okay, now you can see it's ugly, right? This code is pretty much ugly. Okay, we can solve this issue using a famous framework called Express.js. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this code. I'm going to optimize this code using Express.js. Okay, so for that I'm keeping the same code and create another file called Express.js. Okay, so we are running out of time. I already having the example here. Okay, let's first let me show you here. Open. So this is the index file that we done here. Okay. So this is the Express.js code, which is here. Okay. Let's compare this side by side. Okay. Let's reduce some font size too. Friends. Okay. Okay. So now you can see we have index.js here and here Express.js. So here index.js we have a 67 line of code. In Express.js we have 40 lines of code only. Okay. So we are running out of time, so I can't explain the Express.js right now. But I have a GitHub URL here. You can clone the actual source code here. So GitHub. I will post it in chat. Okay. Repositories. Sample. Okay, so this is the code. Chat. Okay. I'm giving you. So this is very basic Node.js API without any framework. So in index.js we didn't use any framework, and then Express.js file we used a framework called Express.js, which is really popular in industry. Okay, so let's move, guys. Let's move on. Time is going. So back to the presentation. Okay, so let's Google together. I'm not a Node.js expert. If I know, I will definitely tell you. If I don't know, let's Google together. So any question or answers? Any questions? Or do you want me to explain the Express.js code? Talk to me.
Yes, Mister. There are a few questions raised by audience. Do you want to answer them right now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, yeah. The first question for you is, what are some of the most commonly used libraries in Node.js?
Okay, there are millions of libraries actually. Okay, so let me show some useful libraries here. Okay, let's move to code in terminal. I think probably you could have noticed when I each time when I change a file, I needed to close the server and restart it again. Okay, so there is a package called notmon actually. So you can install like a npm install notmon. Okay, globally. Okay, so
Okay, then the next question is, isn't there a way to get the request parameters like in Express?
yeah, sure. So here you can see in Express.js, simply we got like data like JSON.data. Sorry, here request body. Okay, request body. But in previous in a normal node process, we did some extremely complex scenario here. Okay, so when you use Express.js, a couple of stuff like getting parameters, modifying, using middlewares are simplified. Okay.
Okay, the next one
Any other
is,
question?
yeah. How is Node.js most frequently used?
How Node.js more frequently used? Okay. Now, Node.js is very famous for microservices. So if you are a computer science or IT students, most probably you have heard about microservices and monolithic. So Node.js is very lightweight. So you can see a simple index.js file, we can wrote a couple of APIs, right? So because of that, industry uses Node.js to build small scale of microservices and host independently because it's extremely lightweight and faster. So if you compare to other languages like Java, C#, you need more computation power like to run JVM or other runtimes. but JS is very lightweight, so it's frequently used to build microservices in industry.
Okay, is it possible to access domain Node.js?
Pardon?
Is it possible to access domain Node.js?
I think you are talking about browsers. So DOMs are actually DOM APIs are provided by browsers.
Okay.
So here we are extracting the V8 engine in Node.js. So here we are handling server-side process only. So we are not going to handle any DOM-related stuffs here. So the DOM is related to browser, and browser provides the DOM APIs.
Okay. How is Node.js different from JavaScript?
As I said before, so JavaScript is a language, okay? So JavaScript is a programming language, but Node.js is a runtime, okay? So we are using, still in Node.js, we are using JavaScript, right? So we are using Node.js to execute JavaScript in server, okay? But JavaScript is a language you can do server-side scripting or front-end scripting or mobile applications with many runtimes. So the difference is JavaScript is a programming language and Node.js is a runtime. That's it.
Okay, then what is the variable data? Is it an array? Is it an array?
What is the variable data? Yeah, exactly. So here, the reason I declared a data here is we didn't use any database. So when I want to store user informations, so since I'm not using any database, I need to store it somewhere, right? So here I'm using an empty array, and after that I'm pushing each user data. So that's why I'm using array. That's data means this array that I declared here. Line number 4.
What is the difference between read file and create read stream functions?
Sorry?
What is the difference between read file and create read stream functions?
All right, so the read file is a one-time operation, and read file stream is a streaming. So when you have a look at a data streaming, so read file, you one time read the context of file. In data streaming, you are keeps streaming the data to read input the Node.js. So data streaming and the one-time read is completely two different stuff.
Okay, I guess that's all in the questions.
Okay, so that's all. So anyone wants to explain this Express.js code or any other questions or doubt? Anyone else? Feel free to talk or feel free to chat. No, right? So yeah, that's it. So okay, guys. So let me introduce myself. I'm Balendrakumar. I'm a software engineer at Creative Software. I'm also studying in SLIT third year student. So I'm mostly I'm a full stack engineer, but mostly working on backend stuff like backend engineering and server side architectures. So here you can see my Facebook and LinkedIn GitHub IDs. So if you want any help or if you want any clarifications or whatever it is, you can feel free to text me in Facebook or LinkedIn. I'm not frequently active in LinkedIn, so feel free to message me in Facebook. All right. So thank you guys. Thank you for this wonderful opportunity. So anything else from the host side?
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with us. It was really an amazing, interesting session, Mr. Balendrakumar. And I hope all of you had a good time with the event. That might be the end of the first event, getting started with Node.js of back-to-back web series. Before we wind up the session, I thank all of you in behalf of our team. It is such a pleasure to have all of you who joined us today. I take this opportunity to convey a heartfelt thanks to the special guest speaker, Mr. Balendrakumar, a senior software engineer and an experienced developer. Last but not least, thank you so much for the lovely delegates who have registered with back-to-back web series. This wouldn't be a reality without the dedication and effort made by the team who worked hardly behind the scene. I'd love to convey my special thanks to you all too. Stay tuned for the next fabulous session curiously. With that, we wind up our first session of back-to-back web series organized by free and open source software community in University of J'pura, with the promise of bringing you the next event as soon as possible. And do not forget to give your feedbacks to the links we have provided in the chat. And yeah, remember, every expert is once a beginner, and this can be the beginning of something you always wanted. Your greatest glory is not in never falling, but in rising every time you fall. A very good night, all of you. Stay safe.